Welcome all, dear colleagues. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lili Békési, the secretary of the conference, and before we start this exciting day, my colleague Rudolf Gustin will tell some words about the main technical information. So please, Rudi.
Greetings to everyone. I hope you can hear me or us well. In case not, let us know in the chat window. Just a few short technical informations. I won't be long. We ask everyone that during the presentations, you would switch off the audio, and actually you can switch off the video as well, since that will save the bandwidth as well. And of course, we ask all the presenters that while they are doing the presentations, they should switch on the video. If there are problems with the internet, then of course you can switch off the video if that helps. And of course, please switch on your microphone as you're doing your presentation, because it helps a lot. About the PowerPoint presentation or PDF or whatever you're sharing, we did a technical rehearsal yesterday, but in case there is any problem, I will be here for the whole day. Do the share screen function, and in case you are sharing audio as well, please switch on the share audio, computer audio option as well. About the question and answer sessions, there will be chairs for each section. I would like to ask you to use Zoom has an option when you can raise hand. I hope you will find that within the menu. It's where you can find the emotion icons as well, and there is an option raise hand. So that will help us to see who will want to do a comment. In case this option will not work, because you never know if we will have technical difficulties, we will find out another solution. In case you have any technical difficulties, you don't hear something well, just let me know within the chat window. And I would like to inform everyone that we are doing a recording of this whole conference, a video recording. So it will be recorded video and audio as well. So I think these are the main essential technical informations. Everybody is automatically muted when they enter, so that will not interrupt the presentations, hopefully. And please remain muted while others are speaking. I think that's all. In any case, you have any questions, let me know in the chat window. And now I will give the words to Pál Richter, the director of the Institute for Musicology in Hungary. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudi, for the very important information. And now let me start. Good morning, everybody, dear professor, colleagues, guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the director of the Institute for Musicology, Research Center for the Humanities, and the host of this event, it is a great pleasure for me, despite of this pandemic situation, to welcome you to the International Musicological Online Conference, Beethoven-reception and Reception History, on the 250th anniversary of Ludwig van Beethoven's birth. As one of the most, if not the most influential representatives of the long 19th century Western music history, Ludwig van Beethoven was the alpha and omega as a composer and as a prototypical entity of the musician and the artist. Anyone who has studied music or is just a regular music lover, Liebhaber, will have some sort of relation to Beethoven. His personality and his art were of essential importance not only to his contemporaries, but also to the late descendants, the people of our age as well. His name became a widespread symbol, going way beyond the realm of the classical music and musicians. His message was equally received by the stubborn enthusiasts of social improvement who considered themselves progressive, as well as those who respected traditions. This is the reason why the fragment of an emblematic work, the Ode to Joy, could become the political expression of togetherness, of humanities belonging together. This fact alone would justify the examination of Beethoven's reception and the history of this reception, both in relation to the musical world and more broadly, involving the arts and society. How did the Beethoven reception appear, and in what ways did it evolve? What works and genres came to the fore in any particular age? When did the ups and downs of the Beethoven cult occur? Examining the development of the Beethoven cult enables us to look for answers to questions concerning the accessibility and reception of works, routes of distribution of the musical scores, the music collections where these scores can be found, the reception of the works, with a particular emphasis on the differences between the various genres, and the music historical elaboration of Beethoven's life work through studies and articles published in the specialized press. From the program of this one-day conference, I assume that the papers to be presented will reveal a multitude of aspects concerning the role of Beethoven and his music in our musical and everyday life in the past and in the present as well. Many thanks to Katalin Kim and her staff at the Department of Hungarian Music History for the professional organizing, and to the National Cultural Fund for the financial support that made this event possible. Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all participants of this online meeting for accepting our invitation and virtually coming to Hungary, a country which played quite an important role in Beethoven's life and in his music as well. I open the symposium wishing you all a fruitful event and a worthy remembrance of Beethoven. Now I ask Professor Tatjana Markovic, the chair of the first session, to begin the conference.
Tatjana, don't forget to unmute your microphone because we cannot hear you right now.
Sorry, so jó napot kívánok.
Jó napot.
Hello to everybody. So I would like to thank to Dr. Richter and especially to Dr. Kim for invitation and especially for gathering us today at this meeting dedicated to Beethoven, almost precisely after 250th year after his birth. It is always a pleasure to be with you. So the first session will include 3 presentations by 3 ladies, musicologists, and it is actually about Beethoven in the 19th century, reception in Agram or Zagreb, then in Pressburg, and also in Transylvania, so historical region. Our first speaker is Professor Vera Katalinic. So although she is well known to all of you, I will just say shortly that she is director of the Institute for the History of Croatian Literature, Theatre and Music at the Croatian Academy of Sciences, University Professor at the Department of Musicology at the University of Zagreb, which, by the way, also just celebrated 50th anniversary these days, and also president of Croatian Musicological Society and so on. So she will tell us more about the presence of Beethoven at the Hrvatski glazbeni zavod or Croatian Music Institute in the 19th century. Please.
Thank you, Tatjana. Thank you very much. I have to share my screen now to show you the presentation. I'll hope it will function. Okay, just a moment to check. Yes, everything functions.
Perfect.
So thank you to the hosts. I'm very pleased to be on a Zoom with you, at least. I hope we will, in a year or so, we will be able to meet in person. I will give a talk about a general survey of the material we have about Beethoven, but you will see some patterns which can be compared to other places of, let's say, at the border, at the edge of the monarchy. So let me tell you something about Beethoven's output in the 19th century Zagreb between intentions and opportunities. In 1819, Beethoven was named honorary member of the Philharmonic Society in Ljubljana. On that occasion, he was obliged to present an unpublished composition, and according to the preserved material in Ljubljana archives, it was a transcription of his pastoral symphony. During the precedent period, even when the symphony was created, since 1801, Beethoven was befriended with the Countess Maria Ananitsky, in 1796 married to the Count Peter Erdődy, to whom Beethoven had, to her, he dedicated 2 trios and 2 sonatas for piano and cello. The Countess lived on her family estates in Burgenland, in Vienna and the neighboring estate Jedlze, and Paukovec, some 20 kilometers from Zagreb. This lifelong friendship, testified by the preserved letters from her possession, ended with composer's death while she passed away 10 years later. During one of her sojourns in Croatia between 1815 and 17, Beethoven intended to visit her, yet he could not carry it through because of his depressive private situation. Although Beethoven never came to Croatia, his music was present here already during his lifetime, almost exclusively in the possession of musically educated nobility, not only in the continental part, that means civil Croatia and Slavonia, but also in the coastal area up to Dubrovnik, at that time already under Austrian crown. Some early editions of Viennese masters like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven can be found in Dubrovnik archives with names of their previous owners, like the Countess Elena Pozza Sorgo, Paolo Gozze, etc. Let me tell you something about musical sources in Zagreb. Some 2 weeks after Beethoven's death, the Musikverein in Agram, or how it was named officially, Societas Philharmonica Zagrebiensis, presented its first public concert. On 18th April 1827, even before the official permit from Vienna arrived, a small group of musicians performed in the hall of the Royal Academy of Sciences building, that was the old university hall, a series of orchestral and chamber works by Haydn, Mozart, Spohr, Mayseder, and the local composer Wisner Morgenstern. On the program was also Beethoven's Septuor, Opus 20, and they performed only 2 movements from this piece. An enthusiastic report was published in Luna, a supplement to the newspaper Agramer Zeitung. Although the society intended to be democratical and open to all estates, at the beginning, mostly nobility participated in its membership and financing. However, that will change already until the mid-19th century. At that time, it was strongly supported by the highest civil and church dignitaries, such as the Banus, who was Ignat Julai at that time, the bishop Maximilian Verchovec, but he passed away 6 months afterwards, and Alexander Alagovic followed him. He was his successor on the church throne. They were all named protectors of the society. The donations by wealthy citizens and aristocrats were not only in the form of financial support, but also in music material. Musikverein started soon to keep records on their acquisitions and inventory. At present, there are some 200 compositions, or better to say shelf numbers, because there are also collections and so on, by Beethoven in the Musikverein archives. And among them, there are 25 first editions or editions published simultaneously with this first edition, or means a month later or something like that. And as well as some 20 early prints dating still from Beethoven's lifetime. The first Beethoven source, which was donated immediately, a score which was donated immediately after the foundation of the society, was his 7th symphony. It was handed to Musikverein with some other scores by the local composer Ferdinand Wiesner, who lived in nearby Samobor. He changed his name to Livadić during the National Revival movement. So here is an overview of donators and the pieces they bequested to the Musikverein. First, he was the first one in 1827. Then Gustav Baron Prandau from Osijek, from Slavonia, who was the first president of the Musikverein. He donated quite a lot of music material in 1828. And then a lot of material came from the legacy of Bishop Georg Haulik, who died in 1869, but his bequest arrived to the Institute only in 1892 by Franjo Gašparić, the canon, who kept the library. And of course, there were some other donors, individuals, some of them unknown, and Musikverein had also bought this grand overture in 1830. Other early prints, mostly published up to 1822, were also donated by Wiesner Livadić, which were not first editions, so I didn't list them here. And from Bishop Haulik's legacy by Stjepan Jelačić Bužimski, the cousin of the Banus, and by some other important persons of the time. Beside Musikverein archives at present, there are almost 70 music collections and archives in Zagreb. There are various music schools and other educational institutions, including Music Academy, but music material is also kept in museum, historical archives, and general libraries. However, these institutions were founded later, mostly from the mid-19th century on, and music material was not always in their primary focus of collecting. There are also some church music collections, and among them the Franciscan Musical Archive is of great importance generally, but Beethoven's work, some 20 of them, originate mostly from the late 19th and later periods. Let me tell you about the performances of Beethoven's music. Music material from Musikverein's archive was needed for the performances of its orchestra, and 2 years later, in 1829, for its newly established music school. At its beginnings, the educational program was organized for singing and strings, later sporadically for winds, and only in 1872 for piano. Thus, the members of the Musikverein's orchestra, especially in its beginnings, were not only the pupils, but also their teachers, as well as amateur members of the society. When needed, members from military bands joined them as well, especially when wind and brass ensemble was needed. There is a lack of archival material about their early productions. Both the records of directory meetings as well as concert programs are incomplete, especially for the initial period of some 20 years. Besides, the first long-lived newspapers date back from 1826, Agramer Zeitung with Luna. It's a cultural paper as an addition to it, and they were in German. And then from 1835 in Croatian newspapers, Novine Hrvatske have been edited regularly. There were some attempts in the 18th century, but of a short break. However, neither of them listed music performances in detail or systematically, but quite occasionally. And even if they did, theater and opera performances, as well as guest performances, were far more interesting for the audiences than concerts, especially school concerts. Only for exceptional occasions, and depending on the interest of the publisher, there was a note, announcement, or even a more thorough presentation of a concert. This attitude slowly changed during the course of the century, so that from 1860s on, reviews, announcements of both opera performances and concerts became almost regular. Of course, private gatherings with music were also only exceptionally mentioned in the newspapers, and exclusively if they had a strong and important national or political impact. In such cases, Beethoven music was not on the program. However, some private salons and amateur chamber ensembles could have included this type of music, for example, of the composer Ferdo Livadic in his house, or at the residence of the Bishop Maximilian Vrhovac-Lagovic, etc., so that investigation of diaries and personal correspondence represent practically the only source for such type of information. Relying on public press, the first found data on performance of Beethoven's music after the initial Musikvereins concert in 1827 was a quite thorough description of the Musikverein school concert on 12 August 1841 at 10 a.m. in the morning concert in the hall of the Royal Academy of Sciences, and it was published in the Croatia Zeitschrift für Vaterländisches Interesse, Wissen, Kunst, Literatur, Theater und Mode. Probably it was a type of journal that tried to imitate the famous Viennese Boyles journal of the same type. The text on, quotes, Prüfungsakademie der Zöglinge des Agramer Musikvereins gives evidence of the highlights in the program, where solos, chamber pieces, arias, etc. by domestic composer Kirchhofer, who was a teacher at the Musikverein and the conductor of the orchestra, and he composed violin music, and international authors such as Moscheles, Jansa, and Donizetti were performed. Finally, quotes, als Muster diene die herrliche C-Symphonie von Beethoven als erste, that was the first symphony, dann der Chor aus Joseph und seine Brüder von Meul als letzte Nummer dieser Akademie. Würdig begonnen, würdig beschlossen, end quotes. However, it is possible that the school orchestra played only one or two movements and not the entire symphony. The program is not kept. The next mention of Beethoven's music is connected with the guest performance of Franz Liszt on 27th July 1846, who performed his paraphrases and transcriptions and some compositions of his own, and Beethoven's Andante con variazioni from the A-flat major sonata. He announced a sonate pathétique, but he changed the repertoire on the spot. The concert of the virtuoso arose much approval, and on that occasion, he was proclaimed honorary member of the Zagreb Musikverein. From 1850s on, a series of concerts with Beethoven's compositions on the repertoire has been registered. The first vocal composition performed on a concert was the song Adelaide by Sophie Kammerer, the prima donna of the Italian opera company at that spot active in Zagreb. It was a private academia in the National Hall, and here is the picture of National Hall. In this building is also our institute. It was on 15 March 1854. During the 1860s, mostly chamber music was executed, quartets, violin pieces, etc. And from 1872, when piano department was founded at the Musikvereins and thus enlarged the school curriculum, Beethoven's piano music became quite regular on the program. Musikverein organized their school concerts at least twice a year, but they were more often with time. It was at the end of the school year, and it was for the feast of Santa Cecilia, the patron of music, on 22nd November. So on this Santa Cecilia Day in 1871, along with pieces by eminent domestic composers Ivan Zajc and Vatroslav Lisinski, music by Rossini and Mendelssohn has been performed, as well as Beethoven's third piano concerto. On the same occasion in 1881, Ivan Zajc, then director of the Zagreb National Opera, started with performances of Beethoven's symphonies within a series of symphonic concerts. So they performed the first, the seventh, the third, the ninth symphony, etc. It's changed from year to year. An important role in cherishing Beethoven's chamber music played the Society for the Advancement of Chamber Music, active during the late 1890s throughout the First World War, with domestic and invited famous chamber ensembles like Pfitzner Quartet, Quartetto di Trieste, Czech String Quartet, etc., who always had Beethoven on their repertoire and undoubtedly raised the quality level of the performance. Finally, on 15 March 1898, for the first time, entire Fidelio, Beethoven's Fidelio was staged, with the internationally famous Croatian soprano Milka Ternina as Leonore, what was one of her most renowned roles beside Wagner and Puccini. The theater director Stjepan Miletić wrote about her later, quotes, "Her greatness lies in the purity of her art. Her classical, rounded, elegant individuality amazes the listener even before noticing her artistry. Thus, in her creation, she offers us a double pleasure as a synthesis, a great artistic personality and a great human individuality," end quotes. Finally, let me tell you something about texts on Beethoven. Performance of Beethoven's music in Zagreb were reflected in the press, especially during the second half of the century. Even though the first music reviewers were not professional musicians nor musicologists or writers on music, towards the end of the century, the situation has slightly changed. They discussed the quality of the performance, but also showed their attitude towards the repertoire. One of the great admirers of Beethoven was Ernst Schulz, music critic in the Agramer Zeitung at the end of the century. Being of Jewish origins, he participated in the musical life of the Zagreb synagogue. He was a well-educated musician and married to a pianist, Olga Granic. He was amazed by Ternina's presentation of the role of Leonore, and in his reviews greeted the good presentation of the international standard repertoire. In the essay on the performance of Fidelio, he tried to send a message to the theater board as well as to the audiences. Quotes, "Ebenso wie der Einfluss Fidelios auf die Entwicklung der deutschen dramatischen Opernliteratur von entscheidender Bedeutung ist, ebenso würden wir wünschen, dass die Gestaltungskraft und der künstlerische Ernst, mit dem die geniale Künstlerin jede ihrer Aufgaben erfasst, in der Folge einen heilsamen Einfluss auf unser ganzes Opernwesen ausübte. Das Gastspiel einer Milka Ternina muss für uns mehr sein als ein bloßes Sichvergnügen an der schönen Stimme oder der schönen Spiel der Künstlerin." End quotes. However, some reactions on Beethoven's music similar to other foreign, especially German pieces, was marked by the repulsion and hostility, especially during the 1860s and 70s. Thus, after the announcement of the program of the already mentioned Musikverein concerts with pieces by Zeitz, Lisinski, Rossini, Mendelssohn, and Beethoven, where Beethoven's piano concerto was played, one member of the society's board publicly protested and criticized the artistic policy of the Musikverein, announcing the resignation from this position. And he said, quotes, "I warned the municipality about the condition of the Zagreb Music Institute, and I take the liberty of advising everyone who cares about the musical progress of our institute to address the high government and the parliament with a memorandum, which would express a desire to remove from Zagreb Music Institute those people who by their ignorance in music bother or who are known as adherents and promoters of musical and cultural reactionarism and Germanism, in which they also raised us young pupils, who obviously tried to suppress our folk music, who are finally chasing away from us those people who are not only very meritorious for our folk music, but also able to educate our music students in the folk spirit," end quotes. One of the outcomes was a protest and hissing of the audiences after the performances of Beethoven's piano concerto. Such texts and tendencies were quite usual for this period, when the musicologist Franjo Ksaver Kuhac entered the Musikverein school as piano teacher, but above all as a researcher of the Croatian folk music, and who strongly advocated the national platform for teaching music as well. Based on his thorough research, in 1894, he published an essay in the Croatian journal Prosvjeta entitled "Beethoven and Croatian Folk Tunes," where he pointed at themes in Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, the one which I mentioned at the very beginning, as being taken from the folk tunes of Croats in Burgenland. It was a sort of continuation of his writings, for example, on Joseph Haydn and his usage of Croatian folk tunes, but it can be also observed as a result of Kuhac's efforts that actually marked the beginning of systematic scientific research in Croatia in the field of the history of music, resulting in a series of articles. And allow me just a few concluding remarks. The attitude towards Beethoven's music in Zagreb underwent some changes in tune levels. Firstly, on the musical, organizational, and educational level, and secondly, on the ideological level. The process of music education and institutionalization lasted for some 45 years, between 1827, when the foundation of the Music Society enabled the gathering of music lovers and organization of concert, and even more when they founded their school in 1829 for the education of musicians, above all for the opera, orchestra, and singers. And it lasted until 1870, when the National Opera Department was established, and in 1872, when the piano department was founded within the music school. Thus, the Zagreb audiences could experience music making not only by foreign guest performers or amateurs in home gatherings, but could develop its own professional body or bodies with professional musicians in public concerts or on the operatic stage, even more when new theater buildings and a concert hall were erected. Better educated members of the Zagreb Society could have compared musicians educated at home with those whom they had heard in more prominent music centers, thus developing standards in the quality of the performance and refinement in reception, as well as influencing the expansion of the repertoire. At the same time, the educational process was directed towards the audiences who had to learn that music could also be an intellectual activity, not only a mere entertainment. That was related to the rise of the Croatian national movement during 1830s. However, national ideas suppressed the international repertoire in favor of the Illyrian rousing songs and early attempts of nationally oriented composers like Wisner, Livadić, and Lisinski, and so on. But still they were tolerated Italian opera because that was nothing else. In the second phase of the national movement during the 1860s, when the National Theatre was already building up its drama department and only starting to organize its small orchestra, national issue got bigger appetites in insisting on the national music, backed by the research of Franjo Kuhać in the 60s and 70s, in the need to confirm national identity, what resulted in somewhat polarized society. One stream wanted to ban from the stage everything international, while the other was more in favor of the international and standard repertoire. The Musikverein, as the main organizer of the musical life in Zagreb, tried to unite both streams, but above all, tried to stimulate the quality of the performance. Consequently, Beethoven and his music were sometimes victims of the ideological pressure, but by the end of the century finally won the battle, gaining their deserved place within the educational process and in achieving the adequate artistic quality that became finally unavoidable part of the repertoire. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vera, very much. It was very interesting to have this insight into the one part of the monarchy, which actually shared the musical life from Vienna. So as Rudolf Gustin informed me, we don't have this automatical function. So if somebody has a question, please give your hand literally. So does somebody has a question or a comment? Then I would start and I would ask you who attended these concerts. Was it for aristocracy or?
It was open. There were concerts just with a fee to be paid. Members of the society had some allowances to get a free ticket or so, but everybody could attend the concert. Mm-hmm. There was just with this Sophie Kammerer, that was a private gathering, so maybe just the members only could attend the concert, but it was rarely actually that happened. And the concerts were held either in this National Hall from the 40s, late 30s on, or in the theater. Before in 1872, the concert hall was opened by the Musikverein.
Thank you. And somebody would like to ask, comment? Then I would also say it's very interesting then for Southeast European people, or for everybody, so to say, out of center. It was Beethoven was not only greatest composer, but also symbol of Germanness or Deutschtum. Yes. So it was sometimes contested as far as I remember, Kuchac said not directly against Beethoven, but he mentioned later that this Germanness can be poisonous for national.
Yes. Well, but it was also an ideological question. This is why poor Beethoven became a victim without, well, he was not such a problem. There were much worse enemies for Kuchac than Beethoven.
Yeah, of course.
Even teachers who were educated in this Germanic school, based on the German schools, like teachers in Prague, for example, he said also that they are spoiled by this German basis, which they have, and they cannot get rid of it.
Yeah, of course. And okay, thank you very much. So
thank you.
Thank you. Hvala. We can move on. So we can also see how it was in Pressburg or today Bratislava with these contested traditions between Hungarian and German culture during the dual empire. It will be presented by musicologist Jana Laslavikova, who studied at the Comenius University in Bratislava, and since now she is working at the Institute of History, Slovakian Academy of Sciences, and since her PhD dedicated to municipal theater in Bratislava, she is passionately dedicated to history of this theater, opera, generally musical life and institutions in a very interesting, so this political context. Today, she will tell us more about the reception of Beethoven's Fidelio. So please, let's begin.
Danke. Also ich spreche jetzt auf Deutsch. Verzeihung. Also schauen wir mal. Ich hoffe, es funktioniert. Jetzt gleich mit meinem... Okay, dann schauen wir jetzt. Also ich hoffe, es geht gleich. Ups. Warte kurz. Okay. Ja, kann man das sehen? Schon, oder? Ich hoffe.
Ja,
gut. Ja. Super. Okay, danke, liebe Kolleginnen und Kolleginnen. Ich beginne mit meinem Beitrag. Beethovens Suche nach dem ewigen Ideal von Wahrheit, Güte und Schönheit, später umgewandelt in Freiheit, Schönheit und Humanität, fand zweifellos Resonanz bei vielen zeitgenössischen europäischen Kreisen. Dies war auch der Fall in Pressburg, wo sich die Aufführung von Beethovens Werken im 19. Jahrhundert zu einer langjährigen Tradition entwickelte. Seine Wurzeln lagen im Besuch des jungen Komponisten in Pressburg im Jahr 1796, als er zusammen mit Nikolaus Smeškal, Ignacio Pancic und Zeno Menzel als Pianist an der öffentlichen Musikakademie auftrat. Dank Beethovens Kontakten mit der Familie von Karl Keglewitsch und dem Komponisten und Musiklehrer Heinrich Klein wurden Beethovens Werke in Pressburg bereits zu Lebzeiten bekannt. Kleins Freundschaft mit Beethoven wird auch durch Konversationshefte dokumentiert, in denen seine Besuche beim Komponisten erwähnt wurden. Zum Zeitpunkt von Beethovens Tod im Jahr 1827 wurden seine Werke in Pressburg in den Residenzen der Aristokraten gespielt. Allmählich übernahm das Bürgertum jedoch die Funktion des Hauptträgers, Empfängers, Verbrauchers und Förderers der Kunstmusik. Es bestand hauptsächlich aus deutschsprachigen Einwohnern, die als Deutsch-Ungarn bezeichnet wurden. Sie betrachteten die ungarischen Kulturtraditionen als ihre eigenen und erklärten der ungarischen Regierung öffentlich ihre Loyalität. In ihrem privaten und kultursozialen Leben blieben sie jedoch ihrer deutschen Kultur treu und nahmen an Konzerten und Theateraufführungen teil, deren Charakter von den Wiener Traditionen beeinflusst wurde. In diesem Kontext bietet sich die Frage, welche Rolle spielte Beethovens Oper Fidelio in Pressburg, nahe der Grenze der Länder der Heiligen Ungarischen Stephanskrone, deren überwiegend deutschsprachige Bevölkerung ab den 1880er Jahren zwischen der Loyalität gegenüber Budapest und seiner eigenen kulturellen Identität oszillierte. Um diese Frage zu beantworten, so mal kurz zuerst die Rolle der Musikvereine in der Bildung von Beethovens Tradition in Pressburg klären. Das reiche kulturelle Vereinsleben war ein unverzichtbarer Bestandteil des gesellschaftlichen Lebens des Pressburger Bürgertums. Der bedeutendste und am längsten bestehende Musikverein der Stadt war zweifellos der Kirchenmusikverein beim Dom, Kollegiats- und Stephans Stadtpfarrkirche zu St. Martin, also Kirchenmusikverein zu St. Martin, kurz gesagt. St. Martin, Pozsony, Egias, Senje, Lett. Also. Es wurde von Kleinschüler Josef Kumli geleitet, einem in Wien geborenen Komponisten und Dirigenten, der die Beethoven-Musiktradition nach dem Vorbild seines Lehrers prägte und 1835 mit den Mitgliedern des Kirchenmusikvereines die Missa Solemnis aufführte. Es war eines der ersten vollständigen Aufführungen innerhalb der Liturgie in Europa und es wurde der Beginn seiner herausragenden Tradition in der Stadt, die während des Bestehens des Vereines gepflegt wurde. Ich spreche nicht viel über diesen Verein bzw. über Missa Solemnis, weil es wurden ganz viele Beiträge gerade über dieses Thema veröffentlicht, aber es ist wichtig, für unseren Beitrag weiter zu erklären. Die nachfolgenden Aufführungen von Missa Solemnis, die größtenteils am Fest der Heiligen Cecilia stattfanden, wurden von ausführlichen Rezensionen in lokalen Tageszeitungen begleitet, die die Größe von Beethovens Figur hervorhoben und auf Kontinuität bei der Pflege der Botschaft des Komponisten hinwiesen. Umso überraschender ist die Tatsache, dass die Beethoven-Oper Fidelio erst 1873 in Pressburg aufgeführt und anschließend im Vergleich zu Beethovens anderen Werken nur sporadisch einstudiert wurde. Desto wichtiger zeigt sich der Kontext hier der Aufführung und die besonderen Umstände, unter denen die Oper aufgeführt wurde. Das neu erbaute Stadttheater, das ein älteres Theatergebäude aus dem Jahr 1776 ersetzte, wurde am 22. September 1886 in Pressburg eröffnet. In dem heute nicht mehr existierenden älteren Gebäude wurde Beethovens Fidelio unter der Leitung des Theaterdirektors Ignaz Czernitz am 15. November 1873 uraufgeführt. 1884 wurde das alte Gebäude, abgerissen und das neue von Ferdinand Fellner der Jüngeren und Hermann Helmer gebaut. Die Diskussion über die Notwendigkeit eines neuen Theaters wurde seit mehreren Jahren geführt, weil ein Teil der Vertreter der Stadt eine umfassende Renovierung des alten Gebäudes vorschlug, anstatt ein neues zu bauen. Ein wichtiger Schritt für die Entscheidung war die Entscheidung des ungarischen Innenministeriums, das nach Inspektion des Theatergebäudes für technisch nicht tauglich erklärte und die Stadt mit dem Bau eines neuen beauftragte. Es sollte die Heimat der einheimischen ungarischen Muse sein. Da die regulären Theaterbesuche jedoch aus dem deutschsprachigen Bürgertum bestanden, beschloss die Stadt, die Spielzeit mit ihren jeweiligen Theaterdirektoren in zwei Teile zu unterteilen, einen deutschsprachigen und einen ungarischen. Und es wurde auch beschlossen, dass die deutschen Aufführungen in den Herbst- und Wintermonaten stattfinden sollten, die unter dem Gesichtspunkt des Theaterbesuches besser geeignet wurden. Die Jahre zwischen 1886 und 1899 waren entscheidend für die weitere Ausrichtung des Theaters, da in den einflussreichen Kreisen ausführliche Gespräche geführt wurden, ob und in welcher Form der darjährige Mietvertrag mit dem Direktor der deutschen Aufführungen verlängert werden sollte. Letztendlich kam es 1899 unter dem Druck oder sagen wir die politische Entwicklung, also Druck der ungarischen Regierung zu einem Wechsel und das Theater wurde an einen einzigen ungarischen Direktor mit einem zweisprachigen deutschen und ungarischen Ensemble vermietet. Diese Entscheidung am Anfang war sehr, sagen wir, willkommen oder war so lockend ausschauend. Und es wurde getroffen, um das ungarische Theater in der Stadt zu stabilisieren und die ungarische Sprache zu verbreiten. Allerdings muss man sagen, da kam zu einer großen Niveausenkung Und das alles auch geschah trotz der ständig geringen Besucherzahlen und des schwankenden Niveaus der Aufführungen, was auch schade war. Ein Blick auf den Spielplan von 1886 bis 1899 zeigt, dass die deutschsprachigen Direktoren Beethovens Fidelio immer zu seiner Zeit in das Repertoire aufgenommen haben, als die Verhandlungen über die Erneuerung des Mietvertrags geführt wurden. Sie waren sich der Tatsache bewusst, dass Beethovens Werke im Pressbuch die Heiligkeit oder sogar Unantastbarkeit der Musikkunst symbolisierten. Das entwickelte sich, ich würde auch sagen, interessant auch in dem vorigen Beitrag, wie wir gehört haben von Professor Katalinic, von einem edukativen bzw. also einen anderen Charakter zu einem ideologischen Charakter, was auch interessant ist. Also aufgrund der Bemühungen der Pressburger, der ungarischen Regierung die Treue zu halten, wurden Beethovens Oper nicht wie in einigen deutschsprachigen Städten als Ausdruck des großen Deutschtums dargestellt. Das muss man wirklich sagen, dass das nicht war, sondern sie betonten vielmehr die Bedeutung des deutschsprachigen Theaters im Pressbuch und wiesen auf seine unersetzliche Rolle bei der Gestaltung der kulturellen Identität der Einwohner der Stadt hin. Die Inszenierung von Fidelio wurde somit zu einem musikalischen Argument, kann man sagen, stille musikalischen Argument gegen die Zentralisierungsanforderungen der ungarischen Regierung. Im neu erbauten Stadttheater wurde Fidelio erstmals 1889 aufgeführt, als Max Kment sich um die deutsche Spielzeit kümmerte. Dieser Direktor, der in Pressburg dank seiner früheren Aktivität im Alten Theater bekannt war, hatte den Ruf eines geschickten Geschäftsmannes. Er war mit den Vorlieben der Theaterbesucher in Pressburg auch vertraut und inszenierte vor allem unterhaltsames Repertoire, darunter häufige Operetten, Aufführungen unter Beteiligung berühmter Künstler aus Wiener Theatern. Kments dreijähriger Vertrag mit Pressburg lief in der Saison 1888-1889 aus und der Direktor war sehr daran interessiert, ihn zu verlängern. Er beschloss, Opernsolisten in sein Ensemble aufzunehmen, den Chor zu erweitern und einen Operndirigenten zu engagieren. Fidelio stand im Programm am Ende der Saison, als das Ensemble zusammengespielt war. Die Aufführung fand am 22. Jänner 1889 statt und die Oper wurde ohne ihre große Leonore-Ouvertüre gespielt. Die Mitglieder des Pressburger Chors Typographenbund retteten unter Anführungszeichen laut Kritiker den gefangenen Chor, also es war Mangel an Chormitgliedern. Der musikgebildete Stadtarchivar und bekannte Referent der Pressburger Zeitung Johann Batka war sich der Mängel dieser Inszenierung bewusst und durchschaute die Hintergedanken von Kment, der sich nicht für hohe Kunst, sondern für den Direktionsposten interessierte. In seiner Kritik konzentrierte sich Batka daher darauf, Beethovens Figur als Komponist hervorzuheben und begrüßte Fidelios Rückkehr auf die Bühne des Pressburger Theaters nach so vielen Jahren mit großer Frömmigkeit. Um zu erklären, also Batka war eine der wichtigsten Personen, war auch Mitglied des Kirchenmusikvereines, also ein Sekretär und sehr eingewickelt eigentlich im Theater, überhaupt im Musikleben in Pressburg im 19. und Anfang 20. Jahrhundert. Und gerade mit Kment hat er keine gute Beziehung. Im Jahr 1890 kam nach Pressburg neuer Theaterdirektor Emanuel Raul. Unter seiner Leitung wurde Fidelio erstmals in der Saison 1892-1893 aufgeführt. Dies war Rauls dritte Saison, in der entschieden werden sollte, ob sein Abkommen mit der Stadt verlängert werden soll. Dieser Moment wurde von den Kreisen genutzt, die das ungarische Theater unterstützten. Sie schlugen vor, einen einzigen Direktor für Pressburg zu engagieren, der sich das ganze Jahr über sowohl um die deutschen als auch um die ungarischen Aufführungen kümmern sollte. Interessant ist, das ist eben der Vorschlag, der dann im Jahr 1899 aufgenommen wurde. Nach langer Diskussion wurde der Vorschlag mit der Begründung abgelehnt, also zu dieser Zeit noch abgelehnt, weil diese Art der Anmutung des Theaters nicht erfolgreich sein würde. Dies war die erste Erneuerung des Abkommens mit Emanuel Raul, bei dem die Diskussion über die Unterstützung des deutschsprachigen Theaters zugunsten zu Raul endete, allerdings erst nach wiederholter Abstimmung. Beethovens Fidelio wurde dreimal in der Saison gespielt. am 12., 17. November und am 28. Dezember 1892. Die letzte Aufführung fand in der Weihnachtszeit statt und der Empfang aufgrund der Feiertage war schwächer. Dafür, die ersten beiden Vorstellungen fanden in der Nähe des Festes der Heiligen Cäcilia statt. Wieder ein wichtiger Moment. Im Jahr 1829 für den Sonntag auf den 20. November und an der Messe nahmen auch mehrere Gäste aus Wien teil, darunter Alfred Schnerich, mein Kustot, der Wiener Bibliothek und Josef Labo, Komponist, auch Pädagoge vom Wiener Konservatorium. Und interessant ist eben diese Verbindung mit Kirchenmusikverein, also der Fest von Heiligen Cäcilia, aber Kirchenmusikverein hat jährlich zu diesem Fest eine große Messe veranstaltet. Und auch diese Nähe von Fidelio-Aufführungen. Für die Inszenierung von Fidelio plante Emanuel Rau die Oper zusammen mit ihrer großen Leonore-Ouverture Nummer 3 in C-Dur aufführen, das laut den Nachrichten der Tageszeitungen zu Beginn der Oper gespielt werden sollte. Batka drückte seine große Freude über die vollständige Inszenierung aus und lobte die Interpretation aller Solisten, insbesondere der dramatischen Sopranistin Marie Seifert. Er interpretierte Beethovens Botschaft als eine, die der musikalischen Tradition von Pressburg entsprach und bezeichnete das Theater als Schöpfer und Träger der Kultur. Er vergaß nicht, Direktor Rau hervorzuheben, der es trotz der vorherrschenden Bedingungen geschafft hatte, qualitativ hochwertige Opernaufführungen anzubieten. Also Batka bezog sich eigentlich auf die Diskussion über den zukünftigen Direktors der deutschen Aufführungen. In Bezug auf den zweiten Abend von Beethovens Oper sagte Batka, die Besucherzahlen seien gering und es sei schade, wegen der hohen Qualität der Aufführung. Am Ende seiner Kritik empfahl er den Lesern im Rahmen der Feierlichkeiten des Kirchenmusikvereines an der Sonntagsmesse teilzunehmen. Wie oben erwähnt, fand die dritte Aufführung von Fidelio während der Saison zur Weihnachtszeit am 28. Dezember statt und abgesehen von der Ankündigung, dass die Aufführung stattfinden würde, erschienen in den Tageszeitungen keine Rezensionen dazu. Johann Batka machte im Zusammenhang mit dem Konzert des berühmten Wiener Helmersberger Quartetts zu Beginn des neuen Jahres, am 8. Jänner 1893, auf diese Tatsache aufmerksam. Das Programm dieses Quartetts bestand aus Beethovens Streichquartett Nummer 15 Amol und ein langer Artikel erschien darüber in der Pressburger Zeitung vor dem Konzert. In dem Artikel sprach Batka über die heilige Pflicht eines jeden Musikkorrespondenten, auf Batkas letzte Quartette aufmerksam zu machen und drückte seine große Zufriedenheit mit der Saison aus, die reich an Beethovens Werken war. Die Sitzung des Theaterkomitees fand zum Zeitpunkt des Konzerts statt und die Vertreter beschlossen, das Abkommen mit dem Rau zu erneuern. Also ist interessant, ist sicher auch also ein wichtiger Zeitpunkt, kann man sagen. Während Rauls 6. Saison in Pressburg wiederholte sich die Situation mit der Erneuerung des Mietvertrags des Theaters allerdings etwas dramatischer. Anfang 1895 schickten die Mitglieder des ungarischen Turdikos-Vereines, das war einer der wichtigsten eigentlich ungarischen Vereines, die in Pressburg also existierten, und sie schickten dem Stadtrat ein Memorandum, in dem sie eine Änderung der bestehenden Theaterführung und die Stabilisierung des ungarischen Theaters in der Stadt forderten, und sie schlugen vor, die Wintermonate dem ungarischen Direktor zuweisen. Da sie wussten, dass die Änderung aufgrund der Zusammensetzung der regulären Theaterbesucher nicht sofort eintreten würde, ein stabiles Publikum war weiterhin deutschsprachig, schlugen sie vor, jedes Jahr in der Wintersaison der deutschen und der ungarischen Direktor zu wechseln. Dieser Vorschlag ging auch zusammen mit den Millenniumsfeierlichkeiten, die dann ein Jahr später stattfanden. Nach langer Diskussion beschlossen die Vertreter der Stadt, einschließlich auch die Mitglieder der Turdikör, diesen Vorschlag nicht zu akzeptieren und verlängerten das Abkommen mit Rau um weitere 3 letzten Tage. Die 3 Aufführungen von Beethovens Fidelio, die am 19. November, 26. November 1895 und dann 25. Jänner 1896 stattfanden, waren die Lichtblicke der Saison, können wir sagen. Rau engagierte auf Podcast-Empfehlen in seinem Ensemble einen berühmten Baritonisten namens Josef Beck. Beck war nach Pressburg gezogen, um sich um seinen kranken Vater, den ehemaligen Kammersänger der Hofoper in Wien, Johann Nepomuk Beck, zu kümmern. Und interessant ist, dass der Josef Beck schon in der Saison 1873-74 beim Ignaz Czernitz engagiert war und nahm im Jahr 1873 an der Pressburger Premiere von Fidelio teil. Also sein Engagement in Pressburg war nach 20 Jahren eigentlich wirklich symbolisch. Die Tatsache, dass die Oper sehr kurz vor dem Fest der Heiligen Cäcilie gespielt wurde, als der Kirchenmusikverein Beethovens Missa solemnis spielen wollte, ist erneut von Bedeutung. Genau wie 1892 wies Batka in seiner Rezension der Aufführung von Fidelio auf diesen Zusammenhang hin. Er sprach über die Oper als feierliche Messe und fügte hinzu, dass es sich um eine dramatisch-musikalische feierliche Messe für die Loyalität der Frau handelte. Er bemerkte auch, dass Beethovens Messe, meinte die Missa Solemnis, seit mehreren Jahrzehnten in Pressburg gespielt wurde. Batka sprach auch über die hervorragende Wiedergabe in Kleine Pressburg. Das war auch ein Name, den die deutschsprachige Tageszeitungen um die Wende des 18. und 19. Jahrhunderts bei der Beschreibung der Stadt verwendeten. Es war ein Spiel, also kleine Stadt. Und Batka betonte eben die Bedeutung dieser kleinen, aber wichtigen Stadt auf der ungarischen Grenze. Josef Beck blieb auch in der nächsten Saison, also 1896-97 in Pressburg, aber Beethovens Fidelio stand nicht mehr auf dem Programm. Eine ähnliche Situation gab sich sogar während der vorletzten und letzten Saison von in Pressburg. Also dies unterstützt eigentlich die Idee, Beethoven zugunsten des deutschsprachigen Theaters zu verwenden, unter Anführungszeichen, da Fidelio nur zu Zeiten der Diskussion im Stadttheater gelangte, wann über die Existenz einer unabhängigen deutschen Saison verhandelt wurde. Somit verkörperte Fidelio das Symbol klassischer kultureller Werte, auf denen die Einwohner von Pressburg ihre eigene kulturelle Identität aufbauten und deren Verlust einen Verlust ihres kulturellen Gedächtnisses bedeuten würde. Also, danke für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. So.
Thank you, Jana. It is again perfect timing. Also,
this is wichtig.
with the first presentation. So, gibt es Fragen, Bemerkungen auf Deutsch, auf Englisch?
Ja. So, ich verstehe Englisch, aber antworte auf Deutsch.
Ja, es ist in Ordnung.
May I ask something?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, because I didn't find the hand to. So this is why I'm speaking. So I have a general question, maybe more. To what extent were German opera productions discussed in Hungarian newspapers and vice versa? You mentioned this double stage somehow, and how was it received in Hungarian newspapers, and how were Hungarian productions received in German newspapers? Could you maybe say something about this?
Aha, also Unterschied zwischen deutscher und sprachiger Presse, ne? Wenn ich das richtig verstehe. Also
naja, Entschuldigung, kurz, in welchem Ausmaß oder zu welchem, in welchem Sinne jeweils die Gegenseite rezipiert wurde in den jeweiligen Besprechungen.
Verzeihung. Verzeihung. Gut. Ist interessant, weil also diese Loyalität der Pressburger zeigte sich eigentlich darin, dass wenn dieser ungarische Teil der Saison stattgefunden hat, haben die deutschsprachige Presse also neutral also einen guten Eindruck geben. Im Vergleich zur ungarischen Presse, die gerade umgekehrt, weil sie waren sich irgendwie auch bewusst, dass doch die Aufführungen auf Ungarisch nicht das beste Niveau hatten. Das Problem war, es war zu weit von Budapest, sag mal so, und es gab auch nicht so viele Gastspiele. Doch, aber nicht so viele wie zum Beispiel aus Wien, ja, weil es waren doch diese Theaterensemble, die dran eigentlich oft auch angewiesen waren. Zum Beispiel die Opernaufführungen waren oft mit Gästen aufgeführt. Nicht immer, aber oft, ja. Und das ungarische Theaterensemble hat diese Möglichkeit weniger gehabt. Also das sieht man ganz deutlich, ja, oder ja. Also ich hoffe, ich habe das richtig beantwortet, aber ist interessant, also das ist auch dieses Spiel, ja, und das zeigt sich eigentlich am besten am Ende im 1920, ja, wann sozusagen Pressburg zu Bratislava, ja, umgewandelt wurde und diese deutschsprachige Presse, oder ja, also ich sage immer diese deutschsprachige, weil das Deutsche ist doch auch anders, ne? Und da zeigen sie waren irgendwie auch enttäuscht, dass Budapest sie gelassen hat. Und da begann erst dieser große Deutschtum. Das ist auch interessant, ja? Also diese Identität von deutschsprachigem Publikum, das immer auf die zwei Seiten irgendwie, kann man sagen, gespürt hat. Also als Deutsch-Ungarn sich gefühlt haben, wollten ihre deutschen Aufführungen, weiterhin Kultur und so weiter und so fort und gleichzeitig die Loyalität gegenüber Budapest. Ist interessant auch, weil das Theater hat geheißen Stadttheater. Allerdings von Regierung her war immer wieder dieser Ansatz von Nationaltheater und es wurde nie offiziell und also bis 1920 war immer Stadttheater, ne? War nie, also als Nationaltheater, Nemzetközi Színház war nie benannt. Allerdings die Regierung forderte ständig die Stadt, die ungarischen Aufführungen zu unterstützen. Also es war vielleicht theoretisch anders, aber in Praxis ist auch interessant. Also es gab immer so dieses Zwischenspiel. Also ich weiß nicht, ob ich das richtig, also gut genug erklärt habe. Insofern auch die Identitätsfrage, das ist eine sehr, sehr schwierige. Da gibt es eigentlich ganz viele historische, also von Moritz Saki beginnend, Ele Manova, die sich mit dieser Frage von deutschsprachigen Pressburger Bürgertum befassen und weil das war das stabile Publikum, ne? Und das war, das entschieden hat immer die, also in Munizipien, ja, also an wen wird das Theater gemietet, welches Programm wird gespielt, weil da gab es ein Theaterkomitee und also, ja, ich habe zu viel gesprochen, pardon.
Vielen Dank.
Also es ist eine komplexe Frage, ne? Aber interessant, also ich will das auch nicht so schwarz-weiß darstellen, dass Beethoven, ja, also so, aber aus der Forschung sieht es so aus. Ist interessant, ich würde mehr sagen als schwarz-weiß, würde ich sagen interessant und nicht zufällig, ja, meine ich auch.
Ich würde sagen, mehr davon können man in der Special Edition von Journal von der Ungarischen Akademie der Wissenschaft bald lesen. Gibt es noch eine Frage, Bemerkung? Bitte sagen Sie, ich sehe jetzt nicht. Vera, bitte.
Ich wollte fragen, also
ja.
Es gab immer gemietete Theatersituationen, also war es keine ständige Oper oder keine...
Das Gebäude gehörte der Stadt.
Ja.
Und die Stadt mietete das
zur einen oder der anderen Seite.
Genau. Und es war die Hälfte der Saison. Es war Oktober bis Jänner war deutschsprachig und Februar bis April war. Aber ich würde nicht von Stagione zum Beispiel sprechen. Ja? Das glaube ich schon ist anders. Es ist mehr diese Theater als Modell.
Ja, Stadtunternehmung war das.
Genau,
ja.
Und dann gab es
mit den slawischen Elementen.
Genau, das ist interessant, weil das Pressburger Bürgertum, es gab natürlich auch, und es waren viele Prozent von Einwohnern, allerdings waren sie nicht in der Schichte.
Ja.
Und schon gar nicht im Munizipien. Also es war wirklich deutsch-ungarisch. Und man muss sich dann vorstellen, heuer feiert man 100 Jahre vom slowakischen Nationaltheater und das slowakische Nationaltheater war in 1920 genau in dieser Situation. Die ungarische Theater war im 1886. Ja, kein Publikum, wenig Repertoire, pardon, aber so. Und keine Darsteller.
Ja.
Also es ist auch interessante Parallele zu sehen, wie man dann das Nationaltheater aufbauen will. Eigentlich auch spät, ja, 1920 ist es gar nicht mehr die Periode von Nationaltheater und rein politisch.
Okay, danke.
Ja.
Wir haben Zeit für noch eine Frage und eine kurze Antwort. Gibt es noch jemand? Dann darf ich fragen, was ist mit slawischem Beethoven? Gibt es, du hast gesprochen über Pressburg und Pozsony, aber wo ist Pressburg?
Pressburg, also von den sagst du die von slowakischen...
Nationale Bewegung oder gibt es...
Genau, das war viel mehr in anderen Städten. Also Pressburg solche war deutsch ursprünglich oder als von Tradition her deutschsprachig und dann ungarisch oder deutsch-ungarisch. Allerdings das slowakische zum Beispiel Martin war eine sehr starke Stadt, gut in Liptov. Und du hast doch auch gut seit 1848 gab es noch von Ludovic Thur und seine Gruppe diese Revolutionsjahre. Allerdings und schon gar nicht, also im Theater gab es 1902 und 1905 gab es zweimal Gastspiel aus Brünn, tschechische Oper, das war das einzige.
Aus Slowakisch oder aus
Brünn?
Auf Deutsch?
Auf Tschechisch. Das war interessant. Das war das einzige, was slawisch sozusagen bis 1919 waren zum ersten Mal so, dass aus Prag Nationaltheater gekommen ist und dann 1920 haben dann die tschechischen, eigentlich tschechoslowakischen Aufführungen begonnen. Aber bis diese Grenze, das Theater war deutschsprachig, deutsch-ungarisch.
Interessant.
Es ist einfach, es ist eine Tatsache, also das ist nichts, ich meine, es gibt natürlich auch als andere Theater in anderen Teilen von Slowakei, sage ich, Martin war eine starke Bewegung, da gab es auch ein Nationalhaus also von Slowaken. Deswegen sagt man auch immer Originalnamen von Institutionen, aber Originalname ist nicht auf Slowakisch. Ist auf Deutsch und Ungarisch. Alle Vereine waren Deutsch-Ungarisch. So, meistens waren zweisprachige. Ne?
Okay. Danke
und das Wichtige war Konfession, nicht die Sprache. Ja,
klar. Danke vielmals. Dann gehen wir weiter. So, our next speaker is Emese Sovolfi, who is assistant professor at the Faculty of Reformed Theology and Music at the Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca, so in Romania. And her main topic or area research is Transylvania, so this historical region, it's musical life, mainly 19th century musical life, and she wrote a lot about institutions, educational or music institutions of Transylvania in the 19th century. Today we will hear more about Beethoven-reception also in Transylvania. So please.
Thank you, Tatiana. It is an honor to take part at this conference, and I feel that it is the third parallel near Zagreb and then Pressburg. To present something of a Transylvanian center town, which is Klausenburg, Kolozsvár, and one of its prominent Kleinmeisters, Georg Prusicka, his Beethoven-reception. While framing the right theme or subject for the present lecture, I was drawn to choose something linked to the Beethoven century, but also close to the region, Transylvania, whose classical musical culture changed. If I may use the romantic word, it changed dramatically during the long 19th century. This metamorphosis began with the reception of the Viennese Triads composers' works at the end of the 1780s and was followed by the national movement in the 1830s, completed by the end of the 19th century with a beautiful institutionalized system that was that could place the region's musical culture. An independent part of the Habsburg monarchy, at the dawn of the 19th century, the Hungarian-speaking region with abundant Saxon culture absorbed both the novelties of Central Europe and functioned as a transit region between the Balkans and the Occident. Its main town, center town, Kolozsvár-Klausenburg, held the honorable position of, quoting Tibor Taljan, the farthest, most remote watchtower of the classical musical globe. So Kolozsvár was the center of the region's cultural events from the end of the 18th century, the years when the Transylvanian government moved its headquarters to the town. In lack of a residential theater or a residential orchestra, we cannot speak of an original national musical landscape at the beginning of the 19th century in Kolozsvár, Transylvania. The so-called Kleinmeisters, musicians originally from Central and Western Europe, were established in Transylvania at the beginning of this century. Their compositions and perhaps small but still representative overstudy is an aim of my musical research. Austrian, Czech, Moravian or Bohemian and Slavonian links can be traced in Kolozsvár in the case of, for example, Anton Polc, Dominik Grosspeter, Philip Kaudella or Georg Ruzicka. I have many hypotheses in bringing this theme to today's conference. One was that the personal links between the Viennese Triad's members and Transylvanian Kleinmeisters and members of the nobility determined and influenced the reception of classical composers in Transylvania. Unfortunately, we can trace only a few personal links between the Viennese Triad members and our small composers. Early works of Australian and Bohemian composers in Transylvania with direct links to the musical center Vienna, such as Philip Kaudella or Georg Ruzicka, present undoubtedly aspects of the classical style in their option of genre, species, or form. The presence and the outlive of the classical style in the first part of the 19th century can also be studied through the reception of the Viennese Triads and Beethoven's works on the Transylvanian stages, in the program of the so-called musical academies, on the theater repertoire, or in the curricula of the local music Vereins school, the conservatorium. And concluding this introduction, the first half of the 19th century in Transylvania witnessed both the rooting of the classical style and the Biedermeier style, as well as the primary step of a romantic aspect, the genesis of the national school. The early Beethoven-reception and the later cult of the composer followed quite similar paths in the Austrian monarchy, Hungary and Transylvania, and in other parts of Europe, as we could hear in the former lecture. And it was perpetuated by the nobility, the musical institutions, and the local artists. These, the latter, the contemporary Eastern European musicians, who by their upbringing, studies, or yearly visits were often closely linked to the cultural life of Vienna, they became the first mediators between the center, Vienna's center of artistic novelties, and the periphery's cultural demands. In the first decades of the 1800s, as I've said, in lack of stable musical institutions in Transylvania, the wandering theater groups, the nobility's saloons provided cultural events for the public. It is no wonder that we cannot point out Beethoven Oeuvre's premiere at the period of Beethoven's life, but the reception was still continuous through newspapers and personal correspondences written to satisfy the needs of the music and amateurs. Here are some, at the beginning, only texts about Beethoven's works addressed to Transylvanian public. One is written by Mihály Esterházy, whose Klaviermeister was Anton Polc, and firstly an anti-Beethovenian musician, then become a Beethovenian adept. Polc's quartet overjoys me. I can't wait to listen to it. Zmeska promised to perform it and to openly tell his opinion about it. I will invite Beethoven, Kaudella and Halupski to listen to it, to and examine it. I find natural that what you write about Polc, the anti-Beethovenian. It is true that most of Beethoven's sonatas are basically fantasies. This is due to the fact that his genie won't know the shackles of convention. I don't wonder that he, Polc, likes the most the sonat pathetic. In spite of its greatness, it heads less heavy as the others. And this sort of cumbersomeness, which is linked to the greatness of the style, is not to the taste of the so-called Clementians. Clementi's compositions are like Venus, whose grace wit will dully lock you down. Poets or anyone else can scarcely release themselves from her embrace. But once swinged over to Beethoven's higher region, he will forget Venus and follow Minerva. This is quoted from a personal letter. Another personal letter written by the same Esterházy Mihály from Pressburg. If the money is too much, I will send an exchange as an exchange without asking you. Without asking you, Beethoven's new opera, the one the singers are rehearsing in the Wiener Theater and is about to be presented. I am extremely curious to see it. Its libretto was written by the same poet who wrote Tage der Gefahr. Conform Beethoven's statement, it is not as beautiful as the former, but is also interesting. The fact that it's presented with only 3 sceneries is not quite a diplomatic proceeding to the public. It is not a mere mistake that we write the early sources, texts about, in Hungarian about Beethoven, always write his name this way. It shows the personal and hearside writing, and also that they didn't really see his name written down. Last of our little about Beethoven and Beethoven in the text is also of Mihály Esterházy. I scorned Polz, especially for the confusion that he ordered Beethoven quartets without revealing which of them he already owns, although I asked him specifically to do so. Anton Polz was music master to the Bánffy family, the Esterházy children, and Graf Lajos Gyulai, all nobility of Transylvania. And this Kleinmeister had also small compositions, such as a rondo a quatre mains for Madame Polix and Veselényi, all presenting the Viennese style. It is not, after a while, it is not only the text that can speak of a Beethoven-reception in Transylvania. We can hear of an actual duel between partitions and between 2 parties, the Beethovenian parties and the party who has to have 3 composers, Clementi, Prince Louis Ferdinand, and Kramer, in order to weigh Beethoven down. We still don't hear of Beethoven representations, only of a legendary burning of partitions in one of the nobility's salons. One night, the dispute became so intense that with great solemnity, they burned at the fireplace Beethoven's C major sonata on one side of the great music hall, and on the opposite side, an octet by Prince Louis Ferdinand. They tried to reconcile the 2 parties after dinner, but without success, so they postponed the arrangement for their next gathering. This is a text from Georg Ruzicka's memoirs, and although we cannot show the actual place where this first event of Beethoven reception was took place in Kolozsvár. This is how the building looks now, and in its 2 fireplaces, the Beethoven partitions and Louis Kramer and Prince Louis partitions were solemnly ruined and led to despair. Of course, Beethoven's life was traced not only in the newspapers and from correspondences. His death was also a major event which had to be told to the public in Kolozsvár. A member of the nobility, Katazeik, wrote this to the founder member of the Kolozsvár Musical Society, Bodor Pál. The renowned Tonkünstler Beethoven died 2 weeks ago. This is a great loss to the musicians. I attended his requiem, where they sung first the work by Mozart, then his own. It was very beautiful, and with a great number of people at the funeral, thousands. Well, at least as how musicologists Ferenc László said, we know that there was one Transylvanian person in the public attending to Beethoven's funeral. This is the part where in Beethoven's life, but after his death, soon his works were emerged and soon became known in the Transylvanian town. Thanks to institutions, the Conservatorium, which was the Musikverein school, and the National Theatre, which had this name until the emerge of the Pest Hungarian National Theatre a few years later. We know of the National Theatres and the Conservatoriums, the Musikverein's archive, that between 1832 and 1841, 8 from Beethoven's symphonies were purchased or copied for these institutions. One of them, for example, the 8th Symphony, was a direct gift from the director of the Musikverein, Georg Ruzicka. Also, Wellington's Sieg was, or on another title, Der Schlacht bei Victoria, was also a present given by Franz Erkel, who was a member of the Musikverein in Klausenburg. So, from the 1830s, we can witness the premieres of Beethoven's works in Kolozsvár, and these are all linked to the local musical society, the so-called Conservatorium. Between 1832 and 1839, copies were made for the National Theatre's orchestra by the members and the music teachers of the local conservatory. Thus, the Ruins of Athens and the Fidelio Overture becomes a piece in their library. They didn't perform it. We don't have any record of the performances. The first public performances were not total performances. From the records, we know that in 1835, while prodigy child Carl Filch, who was later to become Chopin's student, visits the local musical society, they are rehearsing the 5th Symphony of Beethoven. Later on, in 1839, at the Musical Society's Academia, it's a concert, Beethoven Meeresstille and Glückliche Fahrt, a cantata is being performed by the students of the local conservatory. In 1844, the Musical Society's Academia first performance of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony is held. I wanted to show this because it looks like the first Beethoven-reception as the first public performance of a Beethoven piece in Transylvania in Kolozsvár, from a local newspaper, RD Híradó, which also tells that an unknown hymn by Beethoven is being performed. We know from the local archives that it was the Meeresstille and Glückliche Fahrt. And as far as the research goes, we know that the first integral performance of Beethoven's 3rd Symphony was held in 1844 by the local music society, the Conservatorium's orchestra, on 11th of March in 1844. So this is the first public performance with a playbill that we have until now. Of course, there was not only an institutional reception, it is very important how personal receptions can be linked, and this is where we get to our point. Which is Franz Liszt's visit to Kolozsvár, whose attitude, Beethoven attitude, and whose great performance was decisive for the greater public's reception. And from this period, Liszt and Thalberg's Beethoven-reception will be decisive. We don't know of any other Beethoven pieces played by Liszt, only at the end of his farewell concert, the last concert where he performed a Beethoven sonata, and we have yet to find out which of them. But the Musical Society, which he visited on December 6th in 1846, played 2 Beethoven pieces in order to please the great master. An overture, we presume it was the Fidelio, and the symphony, we also presume it was either the 3rd or the 5th because it was on repertoire. So from the late 1820s, quite about the time of Beethoven's death, there is a local Kleinmeister who becomes a prominent figure in the musical culture of Kolozsvár. His name was Georg Ruzicka, but there can be seen all kind of autographs with his name. This is the name he used in his last 3 decades of life. He lived quite long, and his anniversary of death was on 2nd of December. Born in Vienna, he was one of the most representative figures of the early 19th century Transylvanian music. He was active as a reed gun scoree in the town's Piarist church, was also a performing artist, conductor of musical plays in the National Theatre, director and well-acclaimed professor of the local conservatory. His compositions, masses, graduates, pieces for the organ, vocal and chamber music, symphonies, overtures, and 1 opera, Alonso, show the transition from the Viennese to the Biedermeier style, successfully including aspects of the local colorit. Of his Viennese upbringing, we cannot add too much at this conference. We can say that there was a symbolic gesture of Haydn patting him on the shoulder, and he shook hands years later with Franz Liszt in Kolozsvár. So he really represents this transition between the Viennese style and the later Romantic. He didn't meet Beethoven while in Vienna, and he was never in the highest musical circles. No wonder he accepted a music teacher position at the Banfi family in 1810, but kept a few of his Viennese links for the brief seasons that he spent in the Habsburg town with the family until 1817. Although of Viennese origins, Ruzicka learned of Mozart and Beethoven's works only in a secluded period as a music teacher in the Szilágyság, a remote part of Transylvania. In 1811, he was given an enormous sum by the Countess Banfi, almost his yearly wage, to purchase for his own delight all the works by the contemporary composers that he wanted. So he bought Kramer, Clementi, Hummel, Dussek, and of course a few of Beethoven's works. Of his memories, we learned that he did enjoy the cultural life of the Transylvanian capital, Kolozsvár, especially from the time that he befriended Philip Kaudella, the late Kurakin Count's musician, who spent 3 years as a pianist at the Count Wesselényi's house. In this year, 1814, I was able to buy Kramer's piano etudes, works by Hummel, Prince Louis Ferdinand Dussek, and some of Beethoven's compositions. I practiced them with great diligence and was able to perform them many times, so quite soon I knew them by heart. It was this time that Philip Kaudella, whom I knew from the time of my interview, came down from Vienna to Baron Farkas Wesselényi's house. He was a very skillful and qualified musician, and also a very aesthetically cultivated person with whom, although 20 years my senior, we were on the greatest terms. I soon befriended him. Both of us were present at the soirees held by Count Farkas Wesselényi, this impassioned music friend and a great adept of Beethoven. Making music together increased our friendship. The Baron could also play the piano and had a beautiful new Streicher instrument. It was a delight to perform on it. On the soirees, he frequently organized. Most of the town's professional musicians or great amateurs were present. Kramer, Prince Louis Ferdinand, Beethoven, Clementi's works were performed. This is a quote from Georg Ruzicka's Beethoven-reception. And we find out that it was him who was also involved in the anti-Beethoven party. Among the participants of the musical soirees, there were soon 2 parties formed. One was the party of the Beethovenians, led by Baron Wesselényi and Polz, and the other the Prince Louis Ferdinand Kramer-Crementi party. Caudella and myself belonged to this group. Luckily, or to our misfortune, none of the counterparty's members could perform neither Beethoven nor Kramer or Prince Louis, as they were all terrible pianists. Caudella played Prince Louis and Dussek fluently. I myself performed all of these composers well on the piano. This vivid picture of the period's local musical events is in a way the early personal reception of Ruzicka of the great master. Settled in Transylvania in 1810, Ruzicka's endeavors in learning about the latest musical news, his compositions and public performances emphasized an up-to-date and natural development by which the Beethoven oeuvre gained approval in this Transylvanian town. But let us see what did he had in his private library. It was a library full with Beethoven works, and it is the first step in identifying the Beethoven influences in Ruzicka's own pianistic achievements. He had many of the sonatas and most of the variations, for example, the variations on God Save the King or the variations on Andante Favori, he had in both of them in two different copies, the first editions. Not only piano works were in Georg Ruzicka's personal library by the composer Beethoven. He also had, was owner of solistic pieces, voice with piano accompaniment, chamber music. He had a string quartet which was accessible, and liturgical work, the C major mass, was also in his personal library. In the individual process, from the so-called anti-Beethovenian attitude to becoming a devotee of the senior composer is rather a unique feature and can be traced in the increasing number of his transcriptions. Georg Ruzicka transcribed many of Ludwig van Beethoven's works, mostly the symphonic works, into chamber music, into works that they could play at the chamber music performances in house music, salon music, such as the Fidelio Overture for two pianos. We don't know where they could play this, but it is for two pianos. The third symphony for a piano for four hands, the fourth symphony, the sixth symphony, which he revised in the year of his death. The three pieces from the Gellert Lieder, which he used as an ecclesiastical music in the church where he was Regenschory, and a quite unique example, the transcription of the Moonlight Sonata's first part for org and a little fuga afterwards. Adagio samt Fugierten Nachspiele nach Ludwig van Beethoven's 27th work, 27. Werke, is one of the earliest organ transcriptions of this, the masterpiece. The performance, which we are about to listen only briefly, is performed on the same instrument that was probably used in its first performance in 1849. But which is interesting, and what we find interesting is that in the oeuvre of Georg Ruzicka, after the revolution of 1848, there is a great gap in all kind of musical activities. This is one of the few examples where he did show his skills as a composer, and the dating of the document, which is August 1849, is quite a somber time quite a dark time for the Transylvanian Hungarian society, and Ruzicka had both of his children away in the war. We will listen to István Potyó's performance. He is the one who restorated and digitized digitized Růžička's works, and he is the one who is playing. We will listen for 2 minutes. Sorry. We have another example which is not so good. This is from another colleague of mine, Miklós Noémi. Okay, so they tell me that it can't be really heard. I'm sorry, but hopefully you can hear it with your inner ear how it would sound on the org. It has an E major Nachspiel at the end of the first part. Ludwig van Beethoven's works could be found in print or copied versions in the personal library of the composer Georg Růžička, who also made these various transcriptions in order to present the grand symphonic basis to his inner circles. Director of the local conservatory and in charge of the orchestra of the National Theatre, the institution's request or purchase of copy of Beethoven offices, often in more than one copies in the 1830s and 40s, may also suggest this particular recommendation. In this individual process, we can find the hint of other cultural prominent figures in the Transylvanian society. As Růžička wrote, a hint from a fellow musician gave me motivation for this, to make this controversial transcription of one of the most beautiful compositions of the immortal Meister. We can't really know who the fellow musician might have been. It might have been Sámuel Brassai, a renowned polyhistor, or someone who found it important to make this transcription. And concluding, in Georg Růžička's oeuvre, the transcriptions are not the only way for Beethoven's reception. They can also be traced in the variety of genres he used, in the variety of instrumentation he used, or the specific forms and the piano works, all kind of variations and sonatas he wrote for piano. One personal aspect which I found very interesting is a personal note hidden in the transcription of the Sixth Symphony by Beethoven, which is a canon written by Georg Růžička on the verses of Ich bin schon alt und schwach, dahin ist alle Kraft, and all the parties enter. Du bist schon alt und schwach, ist schon alt und schwach. With the personal note that sometimes at a certain point someone will find these transcriptions and decipher the canon because it is in a little bit coded. Until now, there was no decipherment, so the documents can be studied at the National Széchenyi Library in Budapest, where most of Růžička's works are being held. I thought this is a very important part of the personal reception history of Beethoven, which can be traced in institutions as well, and in the personal reception history of a local composer who came from the same cultural center and who later on could take the task of really mediating between the public and the greatest of the masters, Ludwig van Beethoven. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emese. It was very interesting, especially all your archival documents. So we have time, we actually don't have time, but maybe one short question and short answer, if somebody would like. If not, we can continue later with this. And before we became schwach und ohne Kraft, let's go to coffee break and see you in 20. Viera, please.
I have a plea for you. If we don't have any questions, I would like to see your faces to make a photo. Very prosaic one.
Okay, then that could be done also during the break. Good to see you, all of you.
So it will go quick. Yeah. Now let me see who is here. And finally to greet you all in person.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, I think I've done it. See you later. Bye.
See you later at 1 o'clock. Yes.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. So see you at 1.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your great presentations. So
thank you. Thank you for chairing us.
Thank you.
Thank you.